Welcome to the deep dive. It's kind of funny how we spend so much of our lives trying to escape the ordinary.
Oh, absolutely. We're always chasing something bigger.
Right. We want the grand romance or the epic career, the picture-perfect legacy. But imagine if the ultimate secret to existence wasn't waiting for you on some mountaintop.
Or in a fancy corner office.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if he was hiding in, like, a cold cup of tea or in the annoyingly pristine lawn of your most boring neighbor.
Huh. Or even in a sudden embarrassing failure.
That is exactly our mission today. We are going to extract the ultimate unfiltered blueprint for truly living from a newly surfaced, highly philosophical manuscript.
It's a really remarkable piece of source material.
It is. It's a fictional text titled Quiet Days in Eternity, and it's presented as the late-life private writings of the legendary author Henry Miller.
Supposedly written between 1978 and 1980, right? When he was 86 years old.
Yep, 86. And I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, you will look at a cold cup of tea, or a boring neighbor, or a sudden failure in a completely new, liberating light.
Because we're looking at a man who lived this massive, chaotic, legendary life. I mean, the bohemian years in Paris, the roots in Brooklyn.
Isolation in Big Sur, all the lovers, the 30 published posts.
Exactly. And here at the very end of his life, he is just stripping away all the mythology he built around himself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the very first thing he does in this manuscript is confess to the reader that his entire identity as a quote-unquote great writer was basically a gorgeous operatic lie.
Yeah, he's just sitting in a chair in Pacific Palisades, California, watching the light change on a bare wall.
And he makes this profound observation. He says the difference between writing about his life and actually experiencing life with a capital L is the difference between a puddle and the Pacific Ocean.
And the brilliant twist he adds to that thought is that the puddle outside his door contains the entire cosmos. Right. He's realizing that his lifelong compulsion to capture reality on a page, to, turn it into literature, was actually distracting him from the reality itself.
So he's trading the act of creation for the act of pure observation.
Yes. He describes just sitting still and watching the tentative blue of becoming at dawn.
There's this fantastic moment that illustrates the shift perfectly. So Miller receives a letter from an earnest, ambitious kid in Iowa asking for advice on how to be a writer.
A classic fan letter.
Right. And the old Miller might have written like a 50-page manifesto in response.
For sure.
But this 86-year-old Miller contemplates that massive response, stops, and instead sends a 3-line postcard.
3 lines.
It just says, forget about writing, live first, the rest takes care of itself.
It's so blunt.
He tells the kid to stop reading how-to manuals and instead go sit in a diner at 3 a.m. to watch a tired waitress's varicose veins.
He wants him to observe the raw world. He recommends reading Walt Whitman, who he actually calls the cosmic loafer, or Dostoevsky.
But the advice is jarring, right?
Right.
Because it demands that this young man completely drop his ambition.
And Miller himself has stopped writing entirely at this point. Instead, he paints these terrible, sloppy watercolors. The manuscript describes him painting a fig, and he uses way too much water, letting the colors bleed until the fig looks like a, quote, beautiful bruise.
A beautiful bruise.
Yeah, and he goes so far as to call his own famous books, like Tropic of Cancer, bruises on the hide of literature.
Wait, I have to pause and push back on this, though.
Go ahead.
Because if I'm that kid in Iowa, or, if I'm listening to this right now, isn't that incredibly hypocritical?
It definitely sounds like it on the surface.
Right. This is a guy who built an entire global identity, fame, fortune, all on being an author. He wrote 30 books.
He secured his legacy.
Exactly. And now, from the comfort of his California home, he's telling someone else to essentially stop trying. It feels a bit like pulling the ladder up behind him.
I see why it feels like a contradiction, but if we dig into the underlying philosophy here, Miller isn't actually anti-art.
He isn't.
No, he isn't saying creation is bad. What he's critiquing is the striving. He's arguing that art should never be the primary goal. Rather, art should simply be the ash left behind by the fire of his living.
The ash left behind by the fire. Wow.
Yeah.
But you have to actually burn first to make the ash.
Precisely. He's diagnosing this deeply ingrained American anxiety. It's this fear of the dark, of silence, of the void.
Because we don't know how to just exist.
Right. So we fill the void with television, with neon, and with relentless ambition and productivity.
Think about your own career or your own hobbies. How often are you focused on the output? Like the resume bullet point, the finished project, the photo for social media.
Instead of the raw, unmediated act of just doing the thing on a Tuesday morning.
Miller is warning that when you prioritize the ash over the fire, you miss the actual miracle of being alive.
That makes a lot of sense. He's letting go of the need to be the main character in his own manufactured legacy.
And this surrender of the ego, this dropping of the narrative, it forces a much more difficult surrender.
Oh, the physical one.
Yeah. When you stop obsessing over your immortal legacy, you have to turn around and look at your very mortal physical body. And Miller's physical body at 86 is rapidly failing.
The manuscript doesn't shy away from the decay at all. He notes his ruined left knee, the trembling hands that can barely hold that watercolor brush.
And eyes that require a comically large magnifying glass just to read the morning paper.
But the surreal part is that he doesn't experience this decay as a tragedy.
No, he doesn't. He's sitting on his patio. And let's be clear, this isn't some lush paradise. It's a slab of concrete with dying geraniums.
Drinking cheap red wine.
Drinking cheap red wine, yeah.
Yeah.
And suddenly, he has this 30-second experience where all his psychological boundaries completely dissolve.
It's incredible.
He writes that he literally becomes the sunset, the cheap wine, the concrete, the void beneath the earth.
It's a moment of total ego dissolution.
It makes me think of, like, a glitch in a video game.
Oh, how so?
You know when you're playing, and suddenly the camera glitches and clips through a wall.
Yeah, and you see the code, basically.
Exactly. In that split second, the illusion breaks. You aren't the brave hero character anymore. You suddenly realize you are the digital code, you are the glowing screen, and you are the player sitting on the couch holding the controller. All at exactly the same time.
The boundary between you and the game vanishes.
Right.
That is a highly effective way to visualize it. What's fascinating here is how this glitch, this dissolution, connects directly to the Eastern texts Miller spent years studying during his time in Big Sur.
Like Lao Tzu and Zen Buddhism.
Right, the Tao Te Ching. But Miller isn't treating these texts as academic exercises anymore. He realizes that for decades, he treated enlightenment like it was a project, a peak to conquer.
Like trying to write the perfect book.
Exactly the same impulse. But now, he sees that the search itself is the cosmic joke.
The cosmic joke.
Yeah, trying to find enlightenment is like spending your whole life frantically tearing apart your house looking for the glasses that are already resting on your nose.
Oh, man.
That's so true.
The mechanism of searching is what prevents you from seeing. Enlightenment isn't some higher mystical plane of existence accessible only to monks. It's a Tuesday afternoon. It's a crack in the stucco wall. It's the cold cup of tea sitting in front of you.
And he puts this newfound perspective to the ultimate terrifying test during what his young doctor later calls a cardiac event.
Right, the bathroom scene.
Miller is in his bathroom. And I love that he points out the bathroom is mildewed because he notes that the great dramatic events of old age almost always happen on the toilet, not on a mountaintop.
It's so gritty and real.
He feels this massive shift in his chest. His vision goes completely neutrally gray. And he calmly thinks, so this is it. This is the last thing I will ever see.
A moment of absolute finality.
But then the color comes rushing back. He doesn't die.
And instead of feeling terror at how close he came, or even profound gratitude that he survived, he sits there in this mildewed bathroom and feels pure, absolute cosmic hilarity. He laughs until he cries.
He laughs because the tension between our grandiose sense of self and the fragile meat suit we pilot has finally snapped.
He gets the punchline.
Exactly.
Wow.
He realizes that the human attempt to control life is a joke, and death is the punchline. And they are essentially the same thing. They are accomplices.
And the manuscript creates this brilliant contrast right after when he goes to the clinic.
You go with the doctor.
Yeah, he meets this young, smooth-faced doctor who wants to aggressively tinker with Miller's medications. The doctor is treating this 86-year-old body like a malfunctioning clock that can just be fixed with a quick mechanical adjustment.
The doctor's still playing the game, trying to fix the glitch.
But Miller just nods politely, walks out of the sterile clinic into the relentless California sunshine, and just marvels at what a preposterously beautiful day it is.
He refuses to treat his mortality as a malfunction to be solved.
And this embrace of absurdity leads him to an incredible realization about clowns.
Clowns.
Yeah, he literally wakes up one morning with the word clown in his mouth.
It's a profound archetype for him. He realizes he hasn't been a literary titan. He's been playing the clown in literature his entire life.
The guy whose chair collapses.
Right. The figure whose chair collapses when he tries to sit down, whose car falls apart while he's driving, who makes a complete embarrassing mess of everything, but who always stands back up, brushes himself off, and faces the audience.
He tells this story about meeting Charlie Chaplin at some shallow, glitzy Hollywood party decades earlier.
They locked eyes from across the room, didn't they?
They did, and they instantly recognized each other as these holy idiots. They understood that the core of being a clown is exposing your own vulnerability.
Which is dangerous in America.
Exactly. Miller notes that American culture actually harbors a deep, secret hatred for clowns, because the clown's mere existence reveals that the American dream, the perfectly manicured lawn, the reliable beige sedan, the sanitary, heavily insured death,
It's all a fragile cardboard illusion that can blow over in a stiff breeze.
which naturally pivots his attention to his neighbor Walter.
Yes. Walter. We have to talk about Walter.
Walter's a 72-year-old retired insurance salesman from Milwaukee. He mows his lawn twice a week with an electric mower, and he washes his beige sedan with an almost religious devotion.
Very conventional.
Now, as someone reading this, my immediate thought is, why is Miller so utterly obsessed with Walter? Isn't Walter the exact embodiment of the boring, conventional, sanitized American nightmare that Miller spent his entire life running away to Paris to escape?
On the surface, absolutely. Walter is the establishment. But Miller has burned through all his youthful bohemian contempt.
So he doesn't hate him anymore.
And not at all. When he watches Walter out on that driveway now, he doesn't feel pity, and he certainly doesn't feel superiority. He feels awe.
Awe.
Yes, awe. Because he recognizes that both of them are engaged in the exact same deeply human project. They are both constructing a narrative out of the terrifying noise of the universe.
Let's slow that down. Constructing narrative out of noise. What does that actually look like for these two men?
Well, the universe is chaotic and meaningless, right?
Yeah.
So we build structures to give ourselves purpose.
Okay.
Walter's structure, his narrative, just happens to be a perfectly manicured lawn and a clean car. Miller's structure happened to be a stack of blank paper and a typewriter.
Aesthetically, their outputs are completely different.
Exactly. But ontologically...
Wait, I'm going to stop you right there. Ontologically, let's translate that for a second for everyone listening.
Right.
You mean on the most fundamental level of just existing as a human being?
Yes, exactly that. On the fundamental level of existing as a fragile consciousness, just trying to stave off the terrifying void, they are doing the exact same work. They are absolute kin.
Man.
Miller realizes that writing a masterpiece and mowing a lawn are both just ways of saying, I am here, I impose order on this small patch of the world.
He actually sits on his patio, raises a glass of that cheap wine to Walter, and says to himself, "You beautiful, boring, unfathomable son of a bitch."
I love that line.
It completely shifts how you view the people around you. We all have a Walter in our lives. So let's be honest, we probably are Walter to somebody else.
Very true.
And Miller traces this deep appreciation for the mundane workers back to his own father. His father was a tailor in Brooklyn.
A quiet man working in steam and wool.
Right. And he never understood his son's wild lifestyle or his books. But Miller realizes now that his father's dumb, magnificent thoroughness, just showing up day after day, pressing pants with quiet dignity, was the actual sturdy foundation that allowed Miller to go off and build his wild cathedrals of words.
It's a really beautiful reconciliation with his roots. But we should clarify that this ability to find the miraculous in the mundane, like in a tailor or an insurance salesman, it didn't just happen overnight in the suburbs.
No, it was forged much earlier.
Right, during his bohemian days when he trained himself to find holiness not in pristine environments, but literally in the gutter.
That brings up one of the most striking memories in the manuscript. The dead rat in Paris.
Oh, yeah.
He remembers standing in the freezing rain on the Rue Mouffetard, weeping over a dead rat in the gutter. And he makes it clear he wasn't weeping out of disgust, but out of a sudden, overwhelming recognition.
Recognition of what?
He says looking at that rotting rat gave him permission to feel the whole staggering catastrophe of being alive.
We have to unpack the mechanism of why a dead rat works better for this than a beautiful painting.
Okay, let's do it.
Beauty, especially classical beauty, allows us to maintain an intellectual distance. We can categorize it. We can critique it.
It's safe.
Exactly. But raw disgust or visceral shock bypasses all of our intellectual pretenses. It forces you completely into your physical body in the present moment. That is the core theme of what Miller relies on, sensual anchors.
He talks about physical hunger in the exact same way. He claims the greatest meal of his entire life wasn't some multi-course banquet in a Michelin-starred restaurant.
What was it?
It was a chunk of stale bread and a piece of cheap cheese that he ate on a bench in the Luxembourg Gardens in 1931.
Because he was truly hungry.
violently physically starving. That intense bodily hunger bypassed his intellect and transformed the simple act of eating into the original sacred communion, the act of literally transforming the external world into the self.
It all comes down to a specific quality of attention. There's another beautiful example in the text regarding attention with his Japanese housekeeper, Hiroko.
Oh, when she gives him the
Right, a traditional Japanese pickled plum.
And the taste of this plum is aggressively tart and intensely sweet at the exact same time. It shocks his palate because it doesn't allow his brain to easily categorize it as just one thing.
And through this plum, she introduces him to the concept of mono no aware.
Mono no aware.
It's a Japanese aesthetic and psychological concept that translates roughly to the pathos of things, or finding a deep empathetic sadness in the transience of life.
It's the awareness that everything fades.
Yes, but, and this is the crucial psychological shift, the transience isn't a flaw in the design. The transience is the very source of the beauty.
He points out how the Western mind struggles with this so much. The West is obsessed with preservation. Like, if we see a beautiful cherry blossom, our instinct is to pluck it, freeze it, and put it in a glass case in a museum so it never changes.
But Miller realizes that the act of freezing it is what kills it.
The beauty is the falling of the petals. Our brains cause us suffering because we constantly try to hold on to moments, relationships, and youth. Letting go of the grip is what allows you to actually see the beauty.
And this philosophy of letting go translates directly into how he views creation. He writes about watching the legendary jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker Bird playing live in a sweaty club in New York.
Bird wasn't up there rigidly following a piece of sheet music.
No, he was opening a channel, playing purely in the present tense, improvising.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Miller notes that if Charlie Parker hit a wrong note, like a complete mistake, he didn't stop playing. He didn't grimace or apologize to the band.
He owned it.
He took that wrong note and played it with such absolute, unwavering conviction that the mistake suddenly became necessary. It bent the melody around it until it became the exact right note.
Miller says that is exactly how he wrote Tropic of Cancer. He didn't edit, he just kept pushing forward through the mistakes.
It's the ultimate jazz philosophy applied to existing. Think about it like the difference between baking and improvisational cooking.
Okay, I like this.
If you're baking a cake, you're following a strict manual. If you accidentally swap the sugar for salt, the cake is objectively ruined. You have to throw it in the trash.
Right, there's no saving salty cake.
But if you're improvising a soup on the stove without a recipe, and your hand slips and you dump way too much cumin into the pot, you don't panic and throw the soup away.
You lean into the mistake.
Exactly. You add some lime juice, maybe some chili flakes, and suddenly you haven't ruined dinner. You've just invented a completely new, incredibly complex dish.
That is the perfect way to frame it. You play the mistake with conviction until it becomes a feature, not a bug. All of these raw sensory details Miller focuses on, the tart sweet plum, the jazz musician's mistake, the dead rat in the rain, they all serve the same function.
Bypassing the intellect.
Yes, bypassing the rigid, categorizing structures of human language. Miller even makes this cheeky admission that he deliberately never read Marcel Proust, specifically because he wanted to protect his own ignorance.
He didn't want to be influenced.
Right. He wanted to preserve his own unique, flawed aperture on the world without it being influenced by someone else's perfection.
Because he understood that perfection is a dead end.
Yes. He connects this back to a trip he took to Greece with his friend Katsimbalis. They're looking at the ruins, and Miller realizes that the Parthenon in Athens is breathtakingly beautiful because it is broken.
Because it's missing pieces.
Art, and by extension a life well lived, is not the imitation of pristine nature, it's the imitation of loss.
And that concept, the imitation of loss, is brought to a heartbreaking crescendo near the end of the manuscript.
It really is.
Miller receives a letter informing him that his great tumultuous love, the writer Anais Nin, has died of cancer.
This is the woman who essentially proved to him, through her diaries and her life, that the concept of a fixed self is just a fiction.
A beautiful, constantly shifting performance.
A monumental loss for him. How does an 86-year-old man process the death of a mythic figure from his youth?
Not with words. Instead of crying, which he explicitly notes she would have found boring and hated, he goes to his desk, takes out his watercolors, and paints.
But he doesn't try to paint a portrait of her face.
No. He paints a nameless, asymmetrical, deeply bruised violet shape. It is just a mark on paper, an elegy in raw color that completely defies classification or explanation, just like she did.
It's his way of bypassing the intellect entirely and just saying, I was here, I felt the weight of this passing.
He's planting a tiny, defiant flag in the territory of the void.
He knows the paper he painted it on will eventually crumble and the violet pigment will fade in the sun. But the heroism isn't in the permanence of the painting. The heroism is in the gesture itself.
So what does this all mean? We have journeyed through the unfiltered mind of an 86-year-old man who lived 10 lifetimes.
We've talked about dropping the ego that demands a legacy.
We've talked about observing the world with the uncritical attention of a painter.
And embracing your inner clown, the part of you that falls down embarrassingly but always gets back up.
And we've looked at treating your life as a constant, jazz-like improvisation where mistakes are just unwritten melodies.
Synthesizing all of this, it means that to live fully, you have to pry open your desperate, anxious grip on how you think things should be.
Let go of the manual.
Right. You have to stop demanding that your life match the blueprint in your head and instead give your complete, undivided attention to how things actually are.
Whether the reality in front of you is a crack in the stucco wall, a neighbor pushing an electric lawnmower, or your own body slowly breaking down.
The reverence is in the attention.
He captures this with one final, stunning metaphor. The manuscript ends with him sitting out on that concrete patio, watching the stars begin to prick through the twilight.
And he has this realization about the starlight.
Yeah, the light from those stars took millions of years to travel across the freezing vacuum of space just to reach his decaying eye.
The stars creating the light might have burned out eons ago. They might already be dead.
But their light lives on in his active perception.
His human consciousness is acting as the afterlife for those dead stars.
Exactly. And that exact same feeling of profound, staggering awe connects him to the very first human who ever looked up at a night sky and the very last human who ever will.
It collapses all of time into a single moment of observation.
It is a powerful reminder that the miraculous is not geographically or temporally located somewhere else.
You don't have to wait for it. It's not hiding in Paris in the 1930s or in a cabin in Big Sur.
Or in that masterpiece project you keep telling yourself you'll write when you finally have the time.
The miraculous is simply the fact that you are here right now, serving as a conscious witness to the universe.
You do not need to move to a Greek island to find this enlightenment. It is available in your kitchen right now. It is available in the steam rising off a cold cup of tea.
It's all right there.
So as you go about the rest of your day or your week, I want to leave you with a final thought directly inspired by Henry Miller's jazz-infused philosophy. Think about the next time you make a sudden mistake.
A literal spill on your kitchen floor, maybe.
Or a glaring typo in an email to your boss. Or saying the wrong word in an important meeting. A bad watercolor of a day.
What if you leaned into it?
Yeah, what if, instead of immediately panicking or frantically trying to correct it or hiding it in shame, what if you paused and played that mistake with absolute conviction?
Play it like Charlie Parker.
Exactly. What if that wrong note, that embarrassing stumble, is the exact thing that proves you are beautifully, irreducibly alive?